African American art in the 20th century comes from the Smithsonian American Art Museum and will remain on view here at the Albuquerque Museum into January. This exhibition highlights works of art created from the 1920s to the 1990s and really becomes a document of the way that we changed as a country throughout the 20th century to the modern country that we are today. And each one of the artists in the exhibition tells a very different story from their particular perspective. And weaving together those stories really create a tapestry of United States experience throughout the 20th century. Renee Stout created the Colonel's Cabinet, this installation, sculptural installation, really to tell the story of an ancestor that she never had. She invented this ancestor as a world traveler to try to bring a sense of fascination with world cultures and differences amongst people. And she didn't have an ancestor who was fortunate enough to travel around. So she created this colonel, and the reason she made him a colonel is so that he would have the excuse of traveling around the world. There were not many African Americans in the 19th century who could afford to travel, except if you were in the military. So she put him in the military, and she created all of these objects as if these objects were collected by him in his travels. And then he came home and created his cabinet of curiosities or memories or souvenirs of his lifetime. So this work of art really tells a story that never existed. It tells a story of imagination and creativity and exploration of differences amongst human beings. So Renee Stout also is an incredible craftsperson, and she made all of these objects that look so historic and so real, but they were all simply made in her studio in Washington, D.C. James Vanderzee grew up in a small town in Massachusetts and wanted to move to the big city. So he moved to New York City and settled in Harlem and Upper Manhattan, which was one of the thriving centers of African American cultural life in the 1920s. James Vanderzee documented a lot of the middle-class African Americans as they were entering the modern world. And in his portrait of a young man, he shows this young man with his hand on the telephone to show he's very much up to date. He's very much a man of the 20th century. Vanderzee titled all of his works of art, and in evening attire he shows a woman dressed up as she was ready to go out for a night on the town. And I love this sense of fashion, the up-to-date fashion, the 1920s overabundance of the fur colors and the wonderful elaborated dress. So this woman is very much a woman of her time period and up-to-date, and yet she probably had great struggles as the United States was battling with the idea of ethnicity and cultural difference. So this woman said, I am a modern American woman, but there were probably many people who didn't see her that way. Alma Thomas was an artist who lived in Washington, D.C., and she really didn't get any attention as an artist until she was in her 70s. She was this incredibly dedicated teacher. She taught at middle school for 45 years. So in a painting such as Light Blue Nursery, we see these horizontal bands of bright colors that really represent the playfulness and the joy that she had in life, the celebration of the beautiful and the fun and the accessible. And she was very interested in talking with her kids about how to draw out stories when there's nothing there. So when she might say she was an abstract artist, but she wanted people to come up with their own meanings, their own interpretations for her work. So she would name this piece Light Blue Nursery to maybe mean something for somebody, or to inspire a story, maybe to inspire a memory of childhood. And then in the painting on the left, Celestial Fantasy, it really, she lays it all out there. It's just a fantasy possibly about the sky, about the world beyond. And I love the way that she takes very simple, straightforward colors and gives you incredible depth and incredible complexity and subtlety, where if you look at it just quickly, you assume there's almost nothing there. It's a very simple, straightforward painting. It's anything but. William H. Johnson grew up in South Carolina, but pretty soon wanted to get to Europe to learn about the modern trends in art making. He returned to the United States knowing all about the avant-garde experience of Europe. In 1938, he got back to New York and realized that modernism, the modern styles of art, really didn't work for the stories that he wanted to tell. So he created a sort of folk or consciously naive aesthetic that was very communicative and direct in its aesthetic. Alan Rowan Crite was hired on the WPA by the federal government to document life in Boston. He was responsible for basically telling the stories of the Boston community. And he was fascinated with the idea of school kids and the vitality of youthful energy in Boston. This is one of a series of paintings that he created called Schools Out at the end of the school day, where elementary school girls are let go and they're all beginning their walk home to their families. And this painting encapsulates so much of the personality of youth, but also every sort of type of person. There's the bratty girl, there's the smart girl, there's the sweet girl. Everybody is included in this group portrait of this school in the South End of Boston.
Paralyzed, and you were on hair from being.
In addition to the Smithsonian exhibition, African American Art in the 20th Century, we wanted to bring in a number of local artists, artists of African American heritage that are contributing to the visual culture of New Mexico. And one of the great new installations that's been recently created by Iris Graham Vasquez from Santa Fe is this installation called The Girls. And the girls are simply three women who are comfortable having a party, sitting around chatting. And as you walk around the installation, they ask you questions. They invite you to join them in the party. So it's an incredibly wonderfully engaging work of art that really says we're all in this big party of life together. Recently, the museum opened a Works on Paper gallery, and in that small space, we have highlighted works from the permanent collection by African American artists from Albuquerque and Santa Fe and the rest of New Mexico. Some of the last images that you see in the exhibition are these three portraits by artists of themselves. And I love the opportunity for the artists not just to be making works of art that we look at, but the artists here are literally looking back at us and watching us as we're experiencing the objects that they've created. And above these three portraits is the incredibly powerful quote from Langston Hughes that goes, "They'll see how beautiful I am. I too am America." And all of these artists in this exhibition are telling the American story, telling American reality, and telling it in incredibly subtle and diverse ways.